All right, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. Today I'm joined by Angel Eduardo, who is a senior writer and editor at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. Additionally, Angel is also a writer for the Center of Inquiry, on the board of directors for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and is an advisor to the Institute of Liberal Values. So, Angel, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ben. It's great to meet you.
So, when did you first get interested in promoting civil discourse?
In that sense, it's been fairly recent, probably somewhere around 2020.
Okay.
Uh, Maybe a little bit before, just as the discourse really took a swan dive. I guess uh I kicked into my instinct of trying to get mom and dad to stop fighting. And so
Okay.
that's what I meant about in that sense, because I've always sort of been that way. I
Yeah,
grew up with that, and it's always really been off-putting and disconcerting to me when people couldn't communicate with each other or they refused to get along. And I was always the one saying, but that's crazy. It's
sure.
such a waste of energy. And it's just, how could you want enemies? How could you want people that you just refuse to speak to? It seemed counterintuitive to me. So I just always had an aversion to that. And I guess I just, through my art and all my other work, slowly gravitated towards this, doing this sort of bridge building type of work.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that more people would see this as counterproductive to be always up in arms with each other about disagreements. Was there like a
Yeah.
particular moment that you felt like, okay, I got to get involved. This has gone too far.
um, yeah, in terms of, I've always been somebody who wanted to hash things out and argue, and I really enjoy that intellectual sort of stimulation.
Yeah,
I've always been like that. I've always loved discussing things and debating things, but I always kind of kept it within my immediate social circle, just by, you know, that's the way everyone would do it if they didn't have
sure.
some other way. But during 2020, when, all the Black Lives Matter protests and some riots were happening, and then the response to that was just as ridiculous and absurd, and I just felt like a crazy person. And I was
Okay.
sitting there going, am I the only person who sees how insane this is? And of course I wasn't, but it felt that way. And I started writing about it and just trying to make sense of it for myself and also for anybody that might be helped by my way of looking at it.
Sure.
So I started publishing things, and
Yeah.
it, we were off to the races.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I feel like for most Americans, I feel like most people, find kind of the political extremism on both sides to be disturbing. I'm not sure if that's the impression you get as well, but
Oh yeah.
it just seems like the average American is just wondering, like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So, you know,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, I agree. No, yeah, it's kind of like, most of the universe is made of dark matter,
yeah,
and that's the stuff that we don't see and don't really talk about because, it's not the fancy stuff. It's kind of
yeah,
like that. That most of our society is this exhausted majority that doesn't have time or the inclination to get into things, to be on Twitter arguing with people, to hate people. They just want to get up and go to work and do what they got to do. And by most accounts, they're going to be fairly reasonable people that you can actually talk to and, disagree, but you can agree to disagree and you can figure out some compromise if something needs to get done. Most people are like that. And those
yeah.
aren't the kinds of people you're gonna tend to get in these really hyper polarized discourse zones like Twitter and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like if you live on Twitter and you're just judging everything in society based upon what you see there, you're going to be
Yeah.
thinking we're at like a civil war point or something.
Right.
Most people are just like
Yeah.
in their house watching Netflix or something, taking care of their families. They're not engaging in that. So,
Yeah, at least not in that way. I mean,
yeah,
it's not to minimize the problem, because of course people say Twitter is not real life, but a lot of the stuff that happens on Twitter or is
yep,
incited by Twitter does spill over into
yeah,
real
that's
life.
right.
And so it matters, and people should be aware of what's going on. And I'm sure that they are, but probably in a healthier way. They're aware of what's going on in their immediate community. They're aware of what's going on nationally in a way that affects them. But of course, the politics and the news media and all that stuff is responding to the Twitter stuff.
Yep.
And so I can imagine somebody who's not plugged into all this stuff all the time, just kind of looking at the news and being like, what is going on? Everything is so crazy whenever I turn on the TV. But when I walk around my town, everything is basically okay. We have
Yeah.
problems like we always did, but it's not this fever pitch all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like for people that are like really concerned about this, I mean, yes, we should be concerned. At the same time, I feel like just looking at things from a historical perspective, you see that,
Right.
really tense, politically divided times are not unusual in the US or in democracies in general. When people are
Yeah.
allowed to speak, you're going to have some conflicts. So,
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
par for
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
course.
exactly. Yeah. People always think, this election is going to be the one that decides whether democracy will die or, and people go, well, you said that last time.
Yeah.
I say that all the time. Like, I remember 4 years ago and 8 years ago, people were saying this too. And
Yep.
then they go, no, no, but this time it's serious. And I'm like, yeah, you said that 8 years ago too. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it's not
Right.
important. It is. But isn't it weird that you keep repeating the same sort of doom and gloom? Like everyone thinks that the apocalypse is going to happen in their lifetime, right?
Yeah. That's right.
there's that
Yeah.
there's that great Bill Maher bit about how, there was some poll number of people who think that Jesus is going to come back in their lifetime. And his joke was like, oh, of course Jesus is coming back. And of course he's going to want to meet me,
Yeah. That's right.
right? Because it's just such a weird way of thinking about it. Like, what makes you think that, you know, now is going to be the time? Like that'd be wild, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I guess everyone's kind of by nature, a lot of people are kind of attracted to drama. They're afraid of it, but at the same time, um, you know, thinking about things happening in your lifetime seems to be pretty popular and interesting for people. Spices things
Yeah.
up, I guess, makes their life seem more interesting and meaningful. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been thinking about this recently, actually, that, the reason for a lot of the problems that we have is also the solution, or it indicates what the solution must be. And the reason for some of this, at least, is, people need some kind of sense of purpose. They need some kind of sense of meaning, that something that gives their life a kind of trajectory and a forward momentum, right? And nothing does that more easily than some great cosmic cause, so
yeah.
like, there's a sense in which so many people kind of wish that they were living in 1963 or 1944,
Yeah.
because there's just this clear and objective cause that they can get behind, that is truly noble and, fairly black and white in terms of, the morality of it. And it it can consume everything about your life. Everything about your life can be geared towards that, and it makes complete sense,
Yeah.
right? But in the absence of that, we have to sort of build that meaning. We have to find it in more nuanced ways. We have to create it for ourselves, and that's really hard. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's the
you know,
scary part, I think, for a lot of people, because I mean, there is this kind of natural sort of religious like desire to have some
mhm,
type of, someone just basically drop a book and like, hey, this is what the meaning of your life is. Now just play it by the book.
right,
In reality, though, it's a game of kind of figuring that out for yourself, and finding what gives you meaning and what makes you get up every morning and live your life.
right, yeah,
Um,
but that's hard. Yeah,
it's
it's kind of
scary, yeah.
like
It's hard
it's
and
kind of like
scary, and
yeah, it's like when you're growing up, you have to figure out who you are, right?
yeah.
And there are all these sort of prepackaged easy ways out that are on offer. Like, okay, well, are you going to be a jock? Are you going to be a skater kid? Are you going to be a goth kid? Like, well, what uniform are you going to wear, and what, prepackaged opinions are you going to adopt, and things you hate and things you love and people you hang out with and things you do and things you don't do. All that stuff just comes kind of with it, right? You go to Hot Topic and you get your
Oh,
studs and your
yep.
and your platforms and your all that stuff. And then there's also music that comes with it, and a culture that comes with it, and pastimes. And that's an easy way to avoid all the work
Yeah.
of figuring out who you are, right? Like, you're wearing this thing, but is that really you? Because you kind of look exactly the same as these other five people, But it's a human thing. It makes sense. Like and again, I'm not knocking it because I felt it myself. The only thing that's different about me is whenever I tried to do those things, I failed miserably.
Yeah.
I couldn't fit into any of those uniforms. So I was kind of stuck having to do the work with no recourse, So I would have taken it if I could, because it
Yeah. I
sucks.
mean,
Growing up sucks.
there's always that pressure to be a part of some type of group. But I feel like that just kind of deflects from you becoming, whoever you are and you
Right.
figuring that out. Yeah, I love. I was actually thinking exact same thing when you were talking about like hot topic. I was thinking of the sort of the
Yeah.
mall identity complex that people have, where there's always a store for that type of person. There's hot topic. Now there's like Nirvana,
Yeah.
and there's just all these different stores for different types of people, which is
Yeah.
just a really funny way of it's like a high school broken up into chain stores. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me of like Fight Club, where he's like they did that spread where basically his living room looks like an IKEA catalog,
yeah,
right? And he's like, what dining set defines me as a person? Right? Like
yeah,
it's ridiculous, but that's what advertising is, right? They're
yeah,
selling you like a version of yourself that you can piece together through buying things. And all it does is delay the work that you're gonna have to do. And I have a theory that a lot of midlife crises are that. It's people
yeah,
waking up at 45 or whatever it is and going, who am I? What is this? I've been like play acting this entire time. Now I need to figure out who I am. And then they revert and they go like buy the car they wanted in high school. And
yep.
they do that stuff because it's the same move. It's like, let me go back to Hot Topic and see if I can still wear that stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I yes, yeah. If you're struggling to figure out who you are at 20 and you still are when you're in your 40s, it's going to be a lot worse in your 40s because the aging element of all of that, where you feel like, oh,
Right.
time is of the essence. I'm running out the clock right now. I got to figure
Mm-hmm.
my shit, get it together.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, that's that's probably really really scary, and I don't envy people who are going through that because I know it's
Same.
really tough. But
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
yeah, that's just life. So I mean, I'm curious then, one concept that I've seen you promote is the idea of star manning. Can you talk
Mhm.
about what exactly that is?
Sure. So, it's kind of a Three Little Pigs thing with straw manning being the start. And straw manning is when you caricature somebody's argument, right? So you create a version of it that is silly, easily refutable, instead of engaging with the actual argument. And that's a no-no. That's a fallacy. You're not supposed to do that. What you should do is steel man, which is the opposite, which is to find the strongest possible version of their argument. And in my adventures in the discourse, I just discovered that people have a really hard time steel manning. They don't want to do it, and they can't do it even when they want to do it. And part of the reason is because they don't just straw man the other person's argument, they straw man the other person. So they
Mm,
create a caricature of who they're talking to. And when you do that, I mean, there's no hope for engaging with what they're saying in any kind of reasonable way because you're not even looking at them in a reasonable way. And
yeah,
so Star Manning just sort of takes it a step further and says, engage not just with the best and most charitable version of the person's argument, but also the best and most charitable version of the person. Just recognize that they're a human being and they are coming from a place that is the result of their upbringing, their experiences, their education.
yeah,
And that's why they believe what they believe, and that's why they're arguing what they argue. It's all coming from all that sort of stuff in the past. It's like that's the math that got them to their answer. Whether their answer is right or wrong, it doesn't matter. The point is that they're doing it because they think it's the right thing. And if you just have that in mind, it allows you to actually listen to them, and it makes you more effective at disagreeing with them. So it's just a better way of approaching it. And obviously that's not a brand new concept or anything like that. I just gave it a cool, David Bowie inspired label, but it's
yeah.
it's really just, something that people need to be reminded to do. It's not
Oh,
really
for
something
sure.
that people haven't known.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean,
yeah.
you kind of, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, everyone's idea about anything is to a certain extent rebranded concepts. For a modern day audience or
Yeah,
anything
right,
else. We're all
right.
basing our
So
information after those who came before us, so it makes sense.
right.
Um,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're absolutely right. I mean, I always find it disturbing how easy it is for people to dehumanize others who disagree with them, and you
Hmm.
stop looking at them as another person who has their own life experiences. Something shaped them to be who they are and to have these beliefs. But it's very easy for people just to ignore all that and just look at them as, oh, you're kind of an enemy, really, not another human being that I can talk
Right.
to.
Right. Yeah, it's a version of what's called the fundamental attribution error, which is like the way that I uh summarize it is, I have reasons. You have excuses.
Yeah,
Like if I'm
yeah,
late, it's because all this stuff happened that you don't know about. And it was so hard. And man, I really tried to get here, but the world was just against me.
right.
But if you're late, you don't respect me, you don't care about what we're doing, you're not organized, you're not a decent or responsible person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing, just exaggerated and turned toward the moral thing, where it's like, if you believe that, or if you don't believe what I believe,
Yeah.
something is wrong with you. You're a monster. You're a moral monster, or you're an idiot. And either way, I have no reason to talk to you. I have no reason to engage with you, because if you don't see as obvious what I see as obvious, something must be wrong with you. But then of course, flipping that around, if someone treated you that way, you'd go, "Oh, but you don't even understand where I'm coming from. You don't understand all the reasons I have for the thing that I believe." So it's just a failure to recognize that everyone is just like you in the way of, how they rationalize things, how they come to their conclusions. You're not the only person sitting around thinking and reasoning and coming up with reasons for things. That's everybody.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, this is human society in a nutshell. People
Yeah.
uh, just need to be a little bit more easygoing with others and patient, and just understand. We're all just kind of fumbling through life, trying to make the most of it, and
Yeah.
we may have disagreements, but it's not worth killing each other over it. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I always just think, well, just flip it. How would you feel if someone was like, no, you like deserve to be ejected from planet Earth for the thing you believe, right? You'd be like, that's crazy. I mean, if I'm wrong, okay, but like that's a
right,
little excessive, right? But we a friend of mine, her name is Alma Cook. She's great. She had this great tweet where she said, only God can judge me really rolls off the tongue, but only God can judge you. That really sticks in our throat for some reason,
yeah, yeah,
and that's exactly it. It's just brilliant. It's just brilliantly put. And it's
definitely. So then how do you handle sort of aggressive criticism in a world that's like always on edge kind of and looking for things to go after people for?
mm, I see it as like a challenge almost. Like a meditation or an exercise to kind of, okay, this is an opportunity for me to put my money where my mouth is, or to strengthen that muscle of, being patient and listening. Like, okay, this is going to be a really hard one.
Yeah.
It's kind of like getting, like, you're going to have an 11-hour flight. You have to prepare yourself mentally for that. Just go, okay,
Yeah,
I'm going to
it's
be
true.
uncomfortable. I'm going to be uncomfortable for like 13 to 15 hours.
It's gonna suck.
And I'm
Yeah.
just like signing up for that. But somehow doing that helps you get through it. Whereas
Yeah.
if I had to, like, if right now somebody tapped me and put me on a flight for 11 hours, that'd be really rough, because I did not have the chance to sort of get myself there. So there's that. And but there's also, in a more philosophical sense, there's this great quote by James Baldwin where he says, I imagine that one of the reasons people cling to their hatred so stubbornly is because they sense that once the hate is gone, they'll have to deal with pain.
Hmm.
And I think that's true. I think that's really true. And so, whenever, for better or for worse, whenever I get hate and hostility from people, all I see is pain. It just translates to pain
Yeah.
in my view. And that kind of triggers my compassion response. And I just look at them differently. I just go, okay, I'm going to ignore all that. And I'm just going to try to dig through and find what they're actually saying, or what they're actually feeling. Where's all this coming from? And try to tap into that. So it's almost a way of just sidestepping it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I definitely think like the key is empathy and understanding the fact that, you don't know what's going on in this person's head, or, what causes them or makes them feel like they need to do this.
Right.
And
Right.
there's no point in you trying to get worked up because of that. I think
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, it's also kind of a learning and growing opportunity for yourself as well. How do you handle this situation, and how that can that make you a better person as a result of that?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think
Yeah.
life is kind of in a nutshell just a game of overcoming one problem after another. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of go for the ride, and still try to enjoy your life and become better
Yeah.
because of those things.
Right. And there, online there are a couple of extra things, right? You don't know who this person is. They might be
Yeah.
like they might literally be 12 years old,
Yes, that's right.
right? Or I mean, they might be a bot, or
Yep.
they might be somebody who has some kind of mental illness,
Yeah.
or just is really struggling through something, and because you can't get tone of voice, and because you can't do eye contact and all that kind of stuff, it's much harder, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, in terms of your behavior in response to that stuff, it's not a one-to-one conversation. There's an audience, right? The audience could be potentially thousands of people.
Yeah.
And so even that terrible exchange is an opportunity for you to model something that might trigger something in somebody else who's just observing, or looking, happens upon this comment thread and sees, oh wow, this person really just insisted on engaging in a certain way. That's fascinating. I've never seen that. And I've
Yeah.
gotten that before. And that's a good thing too, So
Sure.
it's worth it even in those cases where, something it really goes wrong and the conversation's totally derailed, and there's no progress being made. But
Yeah.
at least it isn't two of you. That's what I always
Yeah.
say.
Do
You
you
know?
have you ever found yourself where you're like, this conversation's too toxic to even spend time engaging with, or are you always
Oh yeah.
open for engaging?
Oh no. I mean, I get exhausted just like everybody,
Yeah.
and
See.
I lose my patience just like everybody.
Yeah.
Um, I do a lot of drafting and deleting. So I'll start to tweet something and then I'll just go,
Yeah.
you know what? No. Right. So yeah, I I'm not even remotely this perfect Zen, person or anything like that. Not even
Yeah.
close. And yeah, sometimes I just go, this is going nowhere and it's just frustrating. So I'm good.
Yeah.
But it's about how you do that, right? It's you're not required to talk to anybody you don't want to talk to. You're not required to invite all this stuff on yourself all the time. There's
Sure.
no rule that says you must do those things. In my view, it's better to not engage at all than to engage poorly. And
Yeah.
so I just try my best to not engage poorly. And if I feel myself verging on that, then I go, this is probably the time to walk away. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll come back to it. Maybe I won't. Maybe I don't feel like talking to this person ever again. Maybe, but I'm at least not going to let myself fall into that pattern of behavior that I think is so unhelpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, I've always kind of felt like it depends on whether it's like going to have any type of constructive benefit for as a
Mm-hmm.
conversation. I think it's very easy. I think I see this people all the time. People like getting into really intense debates over something, um, just for later the two people to be going to bed at night realizing that was a total waste of time, and neither person has any type of change in their thoughts about the
Yeah.
process. So it kind of just depends, I guess, on whether someone's actually interested in actually talking about something in a sort of beneficial manner, or if this is really
Mm-hmm.
just them trying to get reactions out of people or something else. So
Right. Yeah, yeah. But again, there's that audience factor, right?
yep.
Where even if I've been in those situations
Yeah.
and it's worth me modeling what I think is the best way to do it for myself, obviously, but also for anybody else, just to say, look, there are other options. You don't have
Yeah.
to fight fire with fire here. And you can just say, you know what, this isn't getting anywhere. I'm gonna go, but have a good one.
Sure.
Thanks for the back and forth. But there's also the thing of, it's important to remember that no one conversation is likely to have somebody completely change their mind on
No.
anything
Yeah.
that they feel strongly about, right?
No.
Especially if it's something like what you're describing where people are really going back and forth intensely. Obviously these people feel really strongly about what's being discussed there, and it's unlikely that a single conversation is going to make any headway in terms of changing their mind, right? That's just not how we work. I mean, think about how quickly you would change your mind about something that you feel is, so deeply rooted and that you
Sure.
feel is, tied to all that moral stuff. But if at least you can have a conversation that's interesting and engaging and cordial, in the sense where by the end of the conversation, maybe nobody changed their mind, but both of you are open to having another conversation,
Yeah.
that's the victory. In my
Yeah.
mind, that's the victory. It's not changing people's mind because that takes forever.
Yeah.
But,
Definitely.
you
Yeah. I
know,
mean, if you just are able to open people up a little bit to even just discussing an issue in a polite manner, I mean, that's these little wins that can build up to something constructive. And yeah.
for sure. And
Yeah.
even for yourself, keep in
Yeah.
mind you might be wrong,
That's
and
right.
maybe you're the one who should be learning
That's
something right
right.
now,
That's
you
true.
know. So it's always this sort of, the
Back
tables
and
are
forth.
constantly turning.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to keep that in mind at all times because it can be easy to say, "Oh, this poor idiot, he doesn't know better." But
That's
if
right.
I with patience and compassion engage him long enough, he will see the error of his ways, and you're missing half of it
Yeah.
if you do it that way.
Well, I mean,
You know?
that's the dangerous thing that societies find themselves in the first place is this idea that everything for sure.
Right.
Instead of looking at things like, okay, what is most likely to be true based on evidence, you're like, I know this absolutely to be true. That's when you get
Mm-hmm.
to really dangerous territory where you start,
Oh yeah.
burning heretics and stuff.
Yep. Exactly. Certainty is if there's an enemy at all, it's certainty. This
Yeah.
idea, because certainty is it's not just corrosive, it's sort of like a calcification.
Yeah.
Like growth is impossible because you're certain,
Right.
right?
Yeah. It's scary.
That's not
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, got to avoid that at all costs for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one phrase I stumbled upon, looking at your writings and stuff is kind of your, I guess, your go-to phrase. It seems like, but be kind. We're all first drafts. What sort of inspired you to come up with that?
Uh, well, there's a website called 6 Word Memoirs,
Okay.
and sometimes when I don't do it as much anymore, but I would be bored and I would just kind of, they would have prompts or something, and one of them was 6 words of advice. And so I just thought, well, how would I phrase this? And I came up with that, and I thought it worked pretty well. I'm a writer,
Yeah.
so I like that connection to it, and everyone is pretty kind about first drafts. If you're a
Yeah.
writer,
Yeah.
you say, "Here's my first draft." They go, "Okay, I
Yeah.
expect this to kind of be a mess,
Yeah.
but it's about finding the bones and sort of helping you out there and putting some flesh on it." And that's all we are, right? The best we can do is get to the end of a single draft. That's kind of the way human life works out, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's however many pages it is, maybe it's a short one, maybe it's a long one, but either way, you're only going to get to the end of that first draft and you don't really get to revise it.
Yep. That's
So
true.
that's everybody, and you can look back and go, you know what? I'm not really crazy about chapter one, but you can't do anything about chapter one. You got to keep going. And
Yeah.
so
That's right.
it's just a way of looking at it that I find helpful, and it's cute because it's 6 words long,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I think that's really cool and yeah, really, really neat phrase. So that's cool that you came up with it.
thanks. Yeah. There's Hemingway has his famous 6 word story.
Yeah.
The challenge was, can you tell a story in 6 words, and it was for sale, baby shoes, never used,
Uh,
right? And you just go, oh wow, like in 6 words you got this whole story.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's kind of like it's like a challenge for writers, is can you in this super short constricted space, can you create this thing? And so it worked
Yeah,
out.
communicating ideas with that little of space is pretty tough. So you do have to think deeply
Hmm.
about your message.
Yeah, it's editing is yeah, it's a magic, the magic of editing. It's tricky.
So I'm thinking then, living in these historical times, what would you say disturbs you most about polarization in society today?
Hmm. I think what disturbs me most is probably not the polarization itself, but the fact that people seem to enjoy it.
Okay.
Like the
It's like
people
fun. Yeah.
well, I don't know if it's fun. I feel like I don't know if they would characterize it that way. They would see it as necessary,
Okay.
but I think that they are getting something like that out of it
Yeah.
without knowing. One thing that I've said is if satisfying your urge for justice also satisfies other urges that you just so happen to have,
Hmm.
you should pause and think about whether justice is what you wanted or what you got at all.
Right.
Because that's kind of the thing with human behavior, right? It becomes really easy to think you're doing one thing, but you're actually doing something else. And there's a bit of that. And I guess it touches on what we talked about earlier with feeling a sense of purpose and having a sense of identity, right? If there's a clear enemy and you're clearly fighting against that enemy, and the higher the stakes are and the more intense that feeling is, the better off you are in terms of creating your self-conception. You're going to enjoy that. And that's going to be a thing that you're not going to want to go away necessarily.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the thing that disturbs me the most, that people are getting something out of this that I worry they don't realize is as destructive as it is to them, not
Yeah.
just to the discourse or our social fabric, which is also a problem, but just to themselves, right? Just being in that space and being in that, having that sort of psychological weather about you is not good, but everyone seems to feel like it. And maybe it's just me, maybe it's a character thing, because I find being angry really unpleasant.
Right.
And and that's not most people's feeling that I've spoken to. Like they kind of enjoy being angry and they kind of like hating somebody. And I've always found that uncomfortable. Like I just don't
Yeah.
like the feeling of it. It feels kind of gross and exhausting and I can't think straight. I hate being angry and I hate all that sort of, it seems
Yeah.
like wasted energy. So I don't know. Maybe it's
Well,
just me.
no, you're not alone. I feel in the same camp, so I'm glad we're talking because
Okay.
I could feel like sometimes as well that it seems like people have become uh, sort of obsessed so much with their ideology, whatever it is, where they become like on a sports team, and the whole goal of the game is
Mm-hmm.
just to defeat the other team. And you get into these weird situations where, yeah, people are getting this kind of creepy satisfaction over, trying to make other people look as bad as possible. And
Right.
you see
Right.
this in legislative bodies, whether state government or federal government. Just people doing things literally just to make the other side look bad. The whole point of it.
Yeah. You can see it actually really clearly when they're freaking out about a problem and then it turns out that the problem is not a problem, like it's actually
Yeah.
not what they
Yeah.
thought, and they're almost upset that that's the fact. Or they'll find some way of making it seem like it still is. I can't think of a good example right now, but it's kind of like, oh, like, if this crime turns out not to have been a hate crime, that's like good news to me, right?
Right. you
But
say
for
you
some
think.
reason, yeah, you would think like, oh, okay, good, well, at least it wasn't that,
Yeah.
right?
Thank God. Yeah.
And then but for some reason they go, no, it definitely was. If you look at it upside down and backwards, then you see that, and it just becomes this weird, like, why would you want something to be worse? And
Yeah.
yeah, it ties back to that thing of, because it makes my life feel like it has a purpose.
Yeah.
That's my hypothesis for it.
Yeah. I mean, and it just gives that side ammunition to go after the other side more.
Right. Yeah.
Any issue that happens in society, I feel like people are not necessarily thinking so much like, oh wow, this is bad. Let's hope that it didn't actually happen because that would be good. Instead, it's more like, okay, how can we use this now to attack the other side? Because this
Right.
is a gift
Yeah.
for us politically, for example.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's like, wait,
bizarre.
what? What are we
Yeah.
doing
Or
here?
they do the thing where, and everyone does this,
Yeah.
but they do the thing where it's like, well, it's not true literally in this case, but symbolically it is true.
Yeah.
It does speak to a thing that is real, and it's just kind of twisting it around. It's kind of like the Bible's literal when the facts just happen to land.
Yep.
but it's metaphorical when not. It's that kind of
That's
sleight of
right.
hand. Like, like,
Yeah.
oh, but it's an analogy, it's a metaphor. It's not, literally, Jesus didn't literally hate figs. He didn't literally say that. He was trying to talk about something else, and that kind of thing.
Yes.
I don't know how into that sort of stuff you are, but I grew
Yeah.
up Catholic, and so
No,
yeah.
I'm pretty well aware of it. I mean, I'm from Kansas originally, so I grew up right in the
Oh,
Bible Belt, and there's about like a church on every block almost in my town I grew up in. So,
gotcha,
so it was
gotcha.
always kind of funny to see actually, because I think you gave a great example of sort of what's playing out in society using the church scene as an analogy, because there's so
Hmm.
much Bible thumping that goes into it, and then like churches in many ways are competing with each other. Like some will put up signs, "Oh, we have free donuts on Sundays. Come to our service."
Oh wow.
Jesus likes us better. It's and other churches. You can get some really radical ones. For example, like the Fred Phelps Church and stuff.
Yeah,
The Westboro Baptist Church is in Kansas. Where they're literally
yeah,
protesting other churches, saying they're all going to hell, and
yeah.
so you get really crazy stuff. And yeah, I think that's a good example. So
Yeah, it's so human. It's such a human thing, man. It's I want to belong, and for some reason, the like the ground floor of that is, well, the easiest way of belonging is to pick out all the people who don't belong
yeah,
and just kind of point at them and go,
that's
"You
right.
don't belong." It's so
Yes.
weird, but it's
Yeah.
very human.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people are kind of obsessed with sort of purifying their groups, and
Hmm.
yeah, they just don't like anyone that goes against what they say, and it's toxic when you get that way. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm pretty anti-group in general. I find it really, really scary actually to be too
Hmm.
involved with the group, because it just feels like, this group's just one step away from becoming something that's a little bit more radical than most would be comfortable with. So,
Yeah, I feel the same way actually. Uh, this is a George Carlin thing where he says, I love individuals, but I hate groups of people. I
yeah,
hate groups of people with a common cause because pretty soon they're going to start having lists of other people that they don't like and that they want to visit
right.
at 3 a.m. and they're going to all start wearing armbands
Yeah, that's right.
and we're the so and so's, and suddenly you're not a person anymore. You're this part of this giant amorphous thing that is sort of acting above you. And yeah, it's bizarre, So I agree with you. I'm a Groucho Marxist,
Okay.
which is to say, I would never want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I pretty much fit in that camp as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, just it's always been uncomfortable. So I get invited to stuff all the time. I'm just thinking to myself, well, is this I don't really want to be too close here. I
Yeah,
mean, I mean,
yeah.
even social groups, in like high school, for example, I would see social groups, but I was someone that just felt comfortable kind of just, you know, a little bit, hang out with these people a little bit, hang out with these people a little bit. Didn't want to get too involved with, I just felt kind of more fluid about who I'd want to hang out
Hmm.
with. So,
Yeah. Oh, it's good that that worked out for you because I did not have that option.
okay.
uh, no, but I had a kind of group of friends that were kind of all over the place in terms of
Yeah.
who they were and what they liked, but we sort of connected on other things. And like you noted at the beginning of this that I'm affiliated with all these different organizations, right? So
Right.
obviously I'm being a little bit cheeky there. I don't mind being in a band and I don't
Yeah.
mind working for an organization that is, geared toward a single purpose. I don't
Sure.
mind that as long as there's a clear line of delineation between me as an individual human being and
Yeah.
what I think and feel and want to say and what this organization is trying to do that I'm contributing to. I don't want to become the organization. I don't want to be
Yes.
indistinguishable from it.
That's
So as
the
long
key.
as that, yeah, as long as that dividing line is there, then it's okay. And I get it. And, political affiliations start to really blur. Religious stuff starts to really blur
Yeah.
in that way. And a lot of social things start to really blur where you're like, you're part of this crew and suddenly you're not yourself anymore. And
Yep.
well, if the crew starts believing X and you don't actually believe X, are you going to leave the crew or are you going to pretend to believe X just to stay in the crew? And that's the kind of thing where I go, up, well, there we go. You know,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, I think that's a good way of phrasing it, because you can't really exist in society without being part of a group, at least loosely. You
Of
can't have a
course.
job without working for someone. You can't be a citizen without being part of some country.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you kind of have to have loose affiliations. But yeah, I think you have to draw the line about, regarding, okay, can I still be myself while being part of that group? Or do I have to, basically conform
Right.
to them? So that's the
Yeah.
kind of balance you got to figure out. And
Yeah. And that's the real allergy that I think both of us are talking
yeah,
about, right? Because
yes,
of course, yeah, I'm happy to be at Fire and I
yeah,
believe in what they're doing and I totally agree and all that stuff. And I love to be with Fair and ILV and all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, but I'm still me and I get
right.
to speak for myself. And no one has ever told me, you must say this, you cannot say
Yep.
this, you know? So as long as that's happening, then we're cool. And, I have social circles or groups of people that I hang out with and things like that. But it really does tend to be kind of all over the place in terms of what they believe and where they're coming from politically and just age and everything. There's just this wide variety.
Yeah.
And those are things I never even really think about. I don't care. I care about, you know, they're interesting and they're funny and it's just kind of fun to hang out with all these people who are coming from all these different places and doing all these different things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, that's
yeah,
always something I've kind of tried to seek out as well, because I mean, the more different people you can meet with different life experiences, the more you kind of learn about life in general. That's how
exactly.
you grow. So kind of, I always
Exactly.
have always tried to surround myself with just as many different people from different backgrounds, and sort of, sort of increase the dynamics of who I can be as a person because of that. So
Yeah, likewise. There's nothing you can't learn from. There's no one you can't learn from.
yeah,
And I just try to remind myself of that all the time. So, uh, there's, I have just full of quotes today, but there's an Abraham Lincoln quote where he says, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." And
yeah,
I do my best. I do my best to embody that and just go, I don't understand where this person's coming from. I can't imagine how on earth they could come to this conclusion.
right,
And so I follow them and I start engaging and I start trying to figure out what's going on here. And, a lot of times it's fruitful. Sometimes it's not, but I find it a really helpful and healthy way to be because it keeps me from being too comfortable. It keeps me from stagnating,
yeah, yeah. It
you
makes
know?
sense because I mean, it's if you don't like someone, there's probably a lot you don't know about them and the
Right.
reasoning for that. And that's a whole another education you get about the world. So
Right.
um,
Yeah, exactly.
definitely important if you ever want to have an understanding of what's going on. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah. If
but
you want to be effective in any kind of way, you have to understand the circumstances you're in. And
yeah,
that includes understanding the people you're engaging with. If you don't understand them, if you can't, getting back to the star manning thing, right? If you can't put yourself in their headspace and see how they arrived at where they are, and if you can't articulate what they think and feel in a way that resonates with them, that they would agree with, that they would say, yes, this person's actually hearing me, then you don't really understand. And if you don't really understand, you're not going to be effective,
definitely.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why people resort to the bludgeon because they're not understanding and then they're not being effective. And so they go, well, I guess I'm just going to have to hit harder.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
right.
they get the bludgeon out, you
Yeah.
know?
That's the easy solution for them, I guess. Yeah. And when you're
Makes sense.
looking for a
Yeah.
quick fix. Yep.
Yeah. It makes sense.
So then what gives you hope for the future? Living in the world today and thinking about things and where we're going.
The thing that gives me hope for the future is the past. Looking back, you know, uh, there are obviously were horrors and horrible things that have happened, but there's also been immense progress. We've
Yeah.
come really, really far for a bunch of basically stupid monkeys.
Yeah.
Like if you put it in that context, like that's insane. Like we've been to the moon and we're doing all this incredible stuff. We're doing awful stuff too.
Yep.
And so, that beautiful shot in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the ape throws the stone in the air after having discovered
Yeah.
tools, throws the bone, not the stone, throws the bone in the air, and then the bone sort of becomes a space shuttle out in space, thousands of years later. and that it's supposed to symbolize progress, right? Like
Right.
look where we came from and look where we are, right? But that shot works in reverse too, where the space shuttle becomes the bone that is being wielded by an ape that is beating their brother down.
Yeah.
And we're kind of superimposed on those two things. But the fact that we can do this, the fact that we can communicate, you and I, we just met and we're having this conversation, and this technology that we have, and just the fact that I'm not kind of worried that someone's going to break my door down and beat the shit
Yeah.
out of me, and you know what I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
steal
good.
all my stuff. Like I'm reasonably comfortable that I'm not in any danger right now, and I assume you are too, right?
I think so. Yeah. That's right.
Right. So that's something we overlook, right? That's something that we don't even think about, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's just a tiny example of all the things that have linked up to get us to where we are right now in this moment. And so I don't think there's any reason for anything except hope that things will continue to get better despite setbacks, despite real problems. None of this is to dismiss anything,
Sure.
but I see anything that we're dealing with right now as surmountable because we've surmounted so much already. And we can continue to do that. We can continue to slowly, you know, sometimes begrudgingly stumble our way up the
Yeah.
mountain, and yeah, just keep going.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, a great way of phrasing it, because I've always thought to myself as well, history is hope in many ways, because it's just,
Yeah, exactly.
as you were saying, look how far we've come. It's pretty incredible. And just the fact that you and I are here today, I mean, it's kind of like hitting the jackpot, again and again and again, because what are the chances? It's like,
Exactly. Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing that we're even here able to do this, right?
yeah,
So we touched on this earlier, but one of the things that I realized recently, and I wrote about this, is that what is the meaning of life is supposed to be this, that's the Trump question. That's the question that no one can answer. And it's the
sure.
eternal struggle of figuring out the answer to this question. And now I'm like, that's the easiest question in the whole world,
Yeah,
right? The meaning of life is to be alive and to be conscious and to experience it.
yeah, yeah,
Like that. What else could it be? So it just becomes, well, what's the point? The point is to make this as good as we can for as many people as we can for as long as we can,
yeah.
because we're here to experience it, you
Yeah,
know?
that's I mean, that's right. I mean, if you're taking that question in in a literal sense, I mean, you are born to live. So it's just,
Yeah.
that's that, you're born to live your life.
Yeah.
And then, how you want to live that, it's up to you to determine, and what gets you through the day, and how you
Hmm.
form that meaning with you and the dynamics of your life. I mean, that's your ship to sail. So you just kind of
Yeah.
figure it out.
And there's something daunting about that for a lot of people, but for me, it's the difference between despair and hope. Sometimes this sort of stuff gives people despair, and I don't really feel that way. I kind of don't get it, right? So like um when Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David were
Yep.
writing the show, I remember hearing the story that whenever they'd hit a block or something, Jerry would get up and he would stare at this poster that he would have of like the known universe, right? It was just a big
Yeah.
poster of the known universe. And he would stare at it and it would make him feel small, and it would contextualize things for him. And then it would get him in a headspace where he could sit back down and work,
Yeah.
because he realized, oh, this is silly. This problem is not huge. I can figure this out. But for Larry David, it had the opposite effect. Like he would look at that and be like, oh my God, like, why am I doing anything? What's the point?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? So they had totally different
Yeah.
responses to that same fact. So there might be a temperament thing about it. But
Yeah.
the fact that I have to get up every day and make life meaningful for myself, that's a liberating thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no reason for me to despair at all, because every day is a chance to make it better. Every day is a chance to grow and learn and absorb and just experience the fact that we're here. It's this
Yeah.
miraculous thing that we're conscious, we're able to know anything. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. It's actually kind of almost a little spooky, the things that you say, because I've thought a lot of the same thing. So,
uh-huh.
um, but yeah, I mean, I feel like there's kind of two different reactions that people can have when they think about, why am I here? And there's either one, well, okay, it's up to me for me to figure that out and make my, give myself meaning. Or there's other
Mhm.
people that are like, how can I live without having some meaning told to me? There's no
Mhm.
point. And I think that's where, like, sort of this fear driven life kind of comes in. When you don't
Yeah.
feel like it's right for you to determine meaning for yourself, then you kind of go off and it's like, okay, maybe I'm going to join a religious organization, or become involved with some type of ideology that gives me meaning.
Mhm.
And so it seems like a struggle for a lot of people to
Yeah.
kind of figure it out, because it's scary to have to
It
decide
is.
for yourself. I think a
It
lot of
is.
people
Yeah.
kind of have the child worldview, where you're kind of growing up, you're being told, okay, this is what you need to do, and that's comfortable because it seems very easy and set in
Mhm.
stone. And doubt is scary. So
Mhm. Yeah, I guess, but it's also kind of, you're spoiling the fun, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like people who ask what's the point are missing the point. The
yeah,
fact that you can ask the question, what is the point? That's the
yeah,
point.
yeah,
And but I understand it. It's it's still, I think there's a running theme in what we've been discussing, right? Because it's still
yes,
that thing of, just tell me what to believe, just tell me what to think and feel, just tell me what I'm supposed to do, just tell me what the point is, so that I can not worry about this, so that I can stop
yeah,
feeling that anxiety, and I don't feel that sort of despair about doing that. And I understand it, but it's also kind of spoiling the fun for you, because imagine a video game where you know every move you have to make, and like you they have like the cheat
yeah,
codes and stuff, and you have them all before you ever played the game before. Like, you sit down with the game and you have the book open, and it's telling you exactly what to do. All
right,
right, now you're going to go left, and now you're going to open this box, and now you're going to use this thing to get that thing and to beat this villain. Well, you're not really playing the game. You're just kind
yeah,
of going through the motions of the game. And so what's the point? I mean, at that point you should ask, what's the point? Like,
yeah,
if you're just going through it and you're not experiencing it, you're just kind of doing it to do it, well, you're missing out, because the whole thing is the experience. You're going
yeah,
to get to, yeah, that's the midlife crisis thing, right? You're going to get to 40 or 45 or whatever it is, and you will have done all the things you're supposed to do. You get married, you have a job, and you have kids, and you buy the house, and you do all that stuff because you're supposed to do it. And then you
yep,
wake up one day and go, who am I? Because none of the things you were supposed to do were actually what you would do, or how you would do it, or when you would do it. And so now you have to go back and go, oh man, okay, what would I have done? And then you start regretting stuff, and then it
yeah,
just gets weirder and weirder from there.
yeah. I mean, I guess it just kind of all, at the end of the day, hinges on, how people will view, their eventual demise and death. Because I feel like a lot of the
Mm,
reason, probably the biggest part about why people will be afraid to give their own life meaning, because they feel like, well, if I don't have meaning already created for me, that means when I'm dead, I'm gone. And I think that's
yeah.
what people are very, very afraid of, um, in my estimation. But
Mm.
at the same time, if you're giving yourself meaning, then it's like, your death's not going to take away your meaning because you came up with it yourself. So
Well, yeah, it's almost like saying that. Yeah, it's almost like saying, this meal is not worth eating because it's going to be over.
yeah,
Like, I will have. There's going to come a point
yeah,
where I will have eaten it, and then what was the point of that? Well,
yeah,
did you enjoy it while you were eating it? Like, was it good?
yeah,
Or maybe not a meal, because you can say, well, I got the nutrients that I was supposed to get out of it. Okay.
right,
But like, even like a roller coaster ride, like, what's the point of a roller coaster ride? It's going to
yeah,
be over in 3 minutes, but it's fun. You're like, that's the point, you know? It's
yeah.
easy to miss that, I guess. I don't know. But then again, there are people that I know who literally read the Wikipedia about a movie before they watch it because they don't like
Okay. Wow.
surprises.
Wow.
Like, I remember this guy that I worked with. He's like, I don't like surprises. And so
What?
he literally looked up and read the whole plot of the movie and then went to go see it. And I don't understand that. That's bizarre to me.
I feel like that'd be a tough way to live, because trying to avoid surprises in life, for example,
Yeah.
outside of movies would be tough. But yeah,
Yeah, he's so funny. He's just like, yeah,
that's
I don't like
hilarious.
surprises. And I'm like, but why did you pay $25 then to go see the
Yeah.
movie? You just read it. I don't know. I guess there's some other version of enjoying it, knowing the ending. I don't know.
I don't know.
So who knows?
That's
It might be
beyond
a
my
temperament.
comprehension of how that works. Yeah. I don't think I can
Yeah.
handle that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. The whole point is the fun, the
Yeah.
fun of it, the ride. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, and you think about like people fearing death. I mean, in a philosophical sense, also, it's the death that gives you meaning in the first place. Because if you never die, then nothing really
Mm,
matters, I suppose, in a different way. So, um,
yeah. I used to think that. I don't agree anymore.
okay.
Yeah. I wrote about this a little bit too, but
So, would you want to
the
live forever then?
absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
If I could get infinity, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the arguments that I thought about and I've heard about why that would suck,
Yeah.
don't persuade me.
Yeah.
The number one reason that people give is, well, all the people you know and love will die.
Yeah.
And you're just going to have to deal with all the people that you know and love dying.
Right.
Well, you kind of have to deal with that now.
Yeah.
Like your
That's
grandparents
true.
and your parents and some
Yep.
friends and,
Yep.
siblings, maybe, like you're going to have to deal with that now. And then you don't get to live forever.
Yeah.
So
That's
you're
true.
kind of already paying that tax without getting the thing. Right. And then the other one is the one you said, where things don't have any meaning if life just goes on forever and ever and ever.
Hmm.
I think that's a mistake because yes, life goes on forever and ever and ever if you're
Yeah.
immortal, but time doesn't. Like experiences don't. You and
Yeah.
I can only have this conversation this time,
Yes. That's true.
right?
Yeah.
If we talk again tomorrow and the next day and every day for 3,000 years,
Yeah.
it will still never be this conversation.
Yeah. It is true.
So the laws of physics are all you need
Yeah.
for something to be precious because it is finite. I can go and live 10,000 years in Japan
Yep.
and then move and live 10,000 years in Egypt. But those 10,000 years that I spent in Japan, I didn't spend anywhere else.
That's
And
true.
those 10,000 years in Egypt are not going to be the same 10,000 years that I spent in Japan. So no matter what, there's an opportunity cost to any
Okay.
decision that you make.
Yeah.
And so dying is just kind of like, that's like saying that a car isn't a car anymore if it
Uh-huh.
no longer runs out of gas. Like
Okay.
if it no longer runs out of gas, it's
Yeah.
not a car anymore, and it's pointless to even have a car. No,
Yeah.
now it's just a more awesome car. So that's the way I look at it. Yeah. So I had that realization really recently. That's probably like the most recent thing I've changed my mind about, because
Okay.
I was
Wow. So this
always,
this is very
yeah,
fresh for you then.
yeah. It's like in the last few months or so. And I was just like, wait, no, that makes no sense. Because all the movies and stuff that you see are
Yeah.
like, oh man, eternal life is actually a curse because everyone dies. And,
Yeah.
you know, all this stuff, dying is what gives your life meaning. Like, no, it doesn't. The thing that gives your life meaning is all the stuff you do with your life. Right.
Yeah.
And if you have more time to do more things, your life just gets more meaning,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, I suppose it depends on like, you know, I guess there could be different ratios of how much meaning something has. For example, like the first time if you love sports and the first time you score a goal in soccer or
mhm,
whatever, that's gonna be more memorable than any other moment probably in many, many ways. So that
mhm,
moment may have more meaning than if you scored 10,000 goals your first game and you've just you never stop. You just score, score, score. So I guess it kind of depends on sort of that ratio of like how meaningful something is. Certainly, you will have meaningful things that happen to you forever if you live forever, I suppose.
right.
I guess you can make an
Yeah.
argument that some things may be more meaningful if it didn't go on forever, just because that moment in time will be more special as a result of that. But that's
Mhm.
also subjective, depending on I guess how people want to sort of take in the idea that you're going to die. How do you want
Right.
to try to make sense of that or
Mhm.
justify that? Every person's kind of on this journey trying to figure out, how am I going to cope with this
Yeah,
impending doom? And
exactly.
and so you kind of all have to rationalize, I guess
Yeah. Yeah,
individually,
it's a
but
cope. It's a cope. It's
yeah,
100% a cope
yeah,
because, like in your analogy, that first goal you score is
yeah,
always going to be the first one you score.
yeah, yeah,
And even if you score a billion after that, It will never be that first one, right? But the trick is that that's not the only game you can play, right?
Yeah.
You can play another game the next day and score your first goal with that one. And
Yes.
you know, in terms of this analogy, you never run out of games to play
Yeah.
because the world is so full of potential experience.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, I mean, if we lived 200 years, we still couldn't read every book that's ever been written. And even then, we probably couldn't read every book that we would want to read, right? Like right now, you and I, we will not be able to read every book we would want to read. It's
Sure.
just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So if you live forever, you still would never catch up, and you would
Yeah.
still never hear all the great music. And then there's all this music that you would want to hear again and again because every time you hear it, it gives you something else. And then maybe after living 10,000 years in Japan, you hear
Yeah.
that song that you heard 40,000 years ago,
Yeah.
and it has a different meaning to you, the same way that it does now, right? Like
Yeah.
if you watch a movie when you're 10 and then you watch it again when you're 25, you're going to have a different experience of watching it. And each one of those is the first time and the only time that you're going to have that experience. So it
Right.
just multiplies all the good stuff. All the bad stuff stays,
Yeah.
but you're dealing with all that bad stuff right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why not get immortality in addition to all that bad stuff that you have to deal with anyway?
Yeah. So then how do you cope with mortality then? Like what's your thought? Because if you want to live forever, then that suggests that there's a little bit of insecurity about, dying in the first place, which is normal. So how do
Yeah.
you how do you cope with that then?
Well, I mean, I don't think about it a lot,
Okay, just try to
but
ignore it maybe, or
not ignore it.
I
Like
know, I'm
I
just joking.
obviously, you know, I know that it's a thing, and there's nothing I could do about it. So I guess there's a sense in which I'm like, you know, I'm gonna do the
Yeah,
best I can while I'm here.
sure.
It'd be awesome if I got more,
Yeah,
but uh for now, the best I can do is this. And yeah, it sucks, but if that's the deal, that's the deal. Okay,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
But if you know a genie appeared and was like, "Would you want eternal life?" I'd immediately say yes.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Immediately.
I feel like I've never really even considered, because I don't think, I mean, I've never really been thinking much about the hypothetical scenario of like if I could live forever. I don't that never thought
Right.
really never crossed into my mind. So I never even engaged in a conversation like that.
Yeah.
Because I just assumed, well, I'm gonna be dead, so it won't matter.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, I mean, I suppose if people could live forever, I mean, they'd be like, yeah, sure. Um, but I guess since I can't, it's more like, well, I'm not gonna worry about it too much, and
Hmm.
it's I'll get whatever meaning I can get for what I have, and at the end of the day, because I also think for me, a lot of it's just based on, well, I'm just lucky enough to be here in the first place. So why do I feel like I'm owed eternal life? What what
Right.
what gives me the right to have that? Considering
Yeah.
that just the fact I'm here is basically a billion miracles in a row. And you think
It's
about
true.
all the things from the formation of the universe to today that had to lead to you existing. I mean, that's pretty insane. So I feel like I'm doing well enough just having the short lifespan that I have, I
Yeah.
guess. So
That's true. That's true. But like imagine imagine like this analogy just popped into my head. Okay, so
yeah.
imagine like um I don't know, Margot Robbie or something invited you to a party like out of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
You know, like you just got an email going, "Hey, it's Margot Robbie. It's really Margot Robbie,
Uh-huh.
and you're invited to my party. Please come." And then you go, "What the hell? Like I don't know what
Yeah.
concatenation of events needed to
Uh-huh.
happen to get this to happen, but hell yeah, I'm gonna go to that party." And you go to that party and you have a great time, and you go, "Man, this is amazing. If I never get invited to another one of these, who cares? Because I can't believe I even came to this." Right?
Mhm.
That's kind of what you're saying right now.
I
But then what?
suppose.
You know, but then what if Margot Robbie was like, "Do you want to come back tomorrow?" Like you'd be like, "Fuck yeah, of course I would come back tomorrow." You know, like
Well,
why wouldn't
maybe
you?
depends if the party's actually fun or not. I don't know.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, if you're having an amazing time and it's the greatest thing you've ever, you know,
yeah.
experienced, which I think the analogy still holds there, right? And then somebody was like, "Well, would you want to do it again?" Yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
I guess
You
if
know?
I like was really familiar with Margot Robbie's work, I'd probably be more interested in that. I it would have to be, I guess, a
Yeah.
different actor or actress that
Yeah,
I'm familiar with, but
pick whoever. I
yeah,
don't know why she popped into my head, but
yeah, I
yeah.
know. But yeah, for
So,
Margot Robbie fans out there, yeah, you're convincing them right now, I think.
yeah, just imagine, like, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then people who say like I would be bored, I
Mhm.
don't understand you. There's so much to do and so much to
Yeah.
learn and so like I don't
I don't think you would
understand.
be bored. Yeah, unless like you just have are bored in general in life, I guess maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's a
but
you problem.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess for me, since it's not part of the reality that is available at the time at this moment in
Yeah,
time, it's
right.
just kind of like I'm
Hmm.
agnostic about the idea, I guess, of living forever. But
Hmm.
I
But I
do
guess
understand the benefits,
yeah, I guess
if possible.
the point it's fun to just think about, but for me
Yeah.
anyway. But it does have some utility in the sense that it can
Hmm.
give you perspective on, okay, well, since my life is so limited
Yeah.
in reality, I should really make the most of every breath,
Hmm.
as much as I can. Like there are
Yeah.
things you just got to do. You got to work. You got to do all that stuff. You got to do stuff you don't want to do. But man, I can really try to make the most of every single moment, even when I'm doing something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
It can actually help you get through that thing you don't want to do to realize, wow, it's just incredible that I'm here at all.
Yeah.
And so maybe, yeah, there's some utility in just having that crazy hypothetical and then bringing it back to your situation and saying,
Yeah.
this is pretty awesome. Even
I
when it
mean,
sucks, it's pretty awesome.
yeah. I mean, it's I guess I mean, yeah, one way I guess people can look at in terms of, just dealing with the sort of the issue that we're talking about philosophically about if you could live forever or not. I mean, when people think about when they daydream, for example, as kids about playing a sport, and say basketball, for example, that's a great example because when people are thinking about basketball, it's like the clock's running down, there's 3 seconds left, and you hit the game-winning shot, and the game's over. It's like to finish off a game or finish off your life with that is just like what it doesn't matter what happens after that because that will always be the greatest moment ever in my life.
Hmm.
um, and so I suppose, in some ways, if a game went on forever and you didn't have that moment, then it would be like, well, I'm living forever, but I won't really have that truly defining moment. I feel like that will make because if something doesn't end, I just feel like it does kind of take away from
Mm.
the drama of it all and kind of the surrealness of wow, like what a finish to a game.
Uh,
Um, but
I
it
guess
just
so.
depends. It depends
I
on
guess so.
it
Yeah.
depends on I guess what at the end of the day. I mean, I guess it just kind of depends. And then maybe this will be a better conversation, 50 years from now when we're talking again, and just we'll be
Right.
we'll be maybe more have more eloquent things to say about
Yeah.
this. It's easy to talk about life or death when we're fairly young compared to many others on the planet.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's
But I'm already
interesting.
anticipating it and I'm going, nah, man. No, I don't want
Yeah, it's I'm gonna live
I don't want
forever somehow. There's
I
the
would love
invention.
to.
Yeah,
No, I mean, obviously I have no delusion that I'm
right.
going to,
No, no,
unless some miraculous technology appears, but
you never know.
I
It's a
absolutely would. Yeah. But the thing about that, the game winning point in that basketball game and then having that defining moment, the only reason that defining moment is even a defining moment is because you could look back on it as a defining moment because your life didn't end. You kept going. So the game ended, but your life didn't, so that
yeah,
you could sit there and think about how awesome that game was.
yeah,
And so that's the thing. You're gonna have a ton of those because things can only happen the way they
yeah,
happen when they happen once. You're gonna have a ton of those, and you're just gonna
yeah,
have this eternity to look back and go, man, that was awesome. And then 4,000 years before that, remember when I did that? That was awesome.
yeah.
You could just keep doing that forever.
Well, I mean,
I don't
I
know.
suppose, or I guess you could just die like knowing, like your last thought was, look all these things I accomplished in my life, and you
Right.
know what, I'm ready to go because I know that I've lived my best life that I possibly could.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
guess I would have an out and I would say, all right, if you could live as long as you want, how about
yeah,
that?
if you live, yeah,
You can live
well,
as
then
long
I
as
guess,
you want.
yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it depends. Yeah, I guess at some point, I mean, I don't know. it's something you
And
can't
also,
test, so it's hard
yeah,
to know.
and also assuming that you're in, decent shape the entire
Yeah,
time, right? Because you don't want to
that's
just
right.
keep aging and degrading.
Yeah,
That
if
would
you're
suck.
just a vegetable, you're not going to be probably having much fun.
Exactly. So yeah,
The,
that would suck. So you can
yeah,
live. How about you could? I would love the option to live as long as I want.
yeah,
And my thought right now is that I would probably never cash that check. I would probably
yeah,
never say
yeah.
I'm good. I would probably never say that.
Well, the good news about this then is that you truly love life, which is good and healthy.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's kind
yeah,
of the moral of the whole thing.
yeah,
Life is awesome. And we're almost,
yeah,
it's like we're being cheated out of all the potential experience we can have
hmm,
because of the laws of physics. Like we're
yeah,
just stuck having only our experience. I'll never know what your experience is like.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why
That's
art is
true.
so great. That's why
Yeah,
art is so great, because the art lets me kind of imagine it a little bit. Like you give me a little bit of insight. I have a kind of tiny window into your perspective for a little bit.
yeah,
That's what's so amazing about art.
yeah. That's very true.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's we've drifted quite a bit, but this has become a
We have.
whole interesting segue
Yeah. Sorry
into
about that.
philosophy. No, this is fun. I think like art in terms of not really knowing what you're going to see until you see it. I think that's the fun thing about conversations like this too. You don't know where it's going to go until it goes
Mm-hmm.
there. Then you're just kind of embracing the moment of that. So,
Mm.
but yeah, luckily I think that I would hope at least that with emerging technologies and scientific discoveries, our lifespans will increase and we'll at least get a little bit more bit of daylight than others before us. So
Indeed. Yeah, we already
uh,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, we already do. Let's
So
just keep going.
yeah, keep going.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
mean,
man.
yeah, I mean, if I don't think I'd be opposed to living for as long as possible, I guess. I mean, but until we're in that possibility, I guess it's really hard for me to have a strong opinion about it.
Right. Yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah.
once you bring to the table, next time I talk to you, Angel, next you bring to the table, like, guess what? I figured out the way to eternal life. What do you make of it? Then I feel like I'll have more of a thought on that. But
Cool.
until
Yeah,
then,
we'll
we'll just
talk
have to
about it
figure it
then.
out. Yeah.
We'll talk about it then. Overpopulation is a problem. That's like a legitimate one. We'll have to figure
Yeah,
out.
I guess that's the thing that you have to be concerned about then with your eternal life. Because what are you gonna do if more
Yeah.
people are having kids and then
Mm-hmm.
all these
No
people are
one's dying.
crowding? Yeah,
Well,
you
we would eventually have to become, spacefaring.
yeah,
That has to be the only way, because
yeah,
otherwise, yeah, yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, this is you can make like a whole series on this topic. It's
Uh-huh. Indeed.
there's so
It's
many ways you can
fascinating.
go with it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
well, it is the most. Yeah, it gotta be. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's probably two questions in life that are truly um, always going to be talked about for every single person that's born and dies, and that is, you know, why are we here, and what happens when we die, or why do we die? However way you
Mm-hmm.
want to look at it. So,
Yeah.
the human element to that, to think that people were probably thinking about this in some way or another since the beginning of our species is pretty miraculous. Since we're still talking about it today the same way, probably. So,
True. Yeah, that's true. And that's one thing that someone posed to me was, but you're never going to find out then, like what happens after you die. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll find out literally everything else.
yeah,
I'll take that. I'll take that
yeah,
deal,
that's right. That's right. Well, I mean, who knows? Since could be a bad choice. Maybe there.
Yeah, who knows, right? Yeah, like
That's right.
the one thing I'll never experience is death.
That's
All
right.
right,
You're gonna
cool.
miss out that experience. That's right.
Yeah, fair trade. That's totally
Sorry.
fine with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be pretty ironic though if people created, sort of, you could live forever, and then when you die, actually, it just turns out that you're really doing the same thing, just in a different way. That'd be kind of a hilarious joke almost.
Ugh.
But I
Yeah,
assume that you,
yeah,
yeah,
the fact of that is probably that's. I mean, I would put my money more on that being the case, just because it's so like perversely funny.
it'd be a pretty funny sitcom kind of almost. Yeah, just
Yeah,
like, oh, didn't cash my ticket, so I guess I'm stuck.
yeah,
And
yeah.
but Oh, well.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
let's see. What are you currently working on in your research? Getting away from the wonderful topic of death.
Yeah. What am I working on?
Yeah.
Right now, just a ton of stuff for Fire.
Yeah.
I just started there a few months ago, and it's been wonderful. And I've been doing a lot of writing on reading and writing and researching on free speech and all the ways that that is under threat today in all these various ways by all these various factions.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, just fascinating stuff, more than just the First Amendment, but just the culture of free speech and how important that is. It's been really wonderful working there. And we'll see. The idea, I'm going to say it kind of like saying that you're going to start working out to sort of pressure yourself into doing it. I'm
Yeah.
going to in earnest attempt to write a book on Star Manning and
Oh, okay.
see what
Cool.
happens there. So the plan is to put a proposal together and sell it. And if I sell it, then I have to write it. So that's the
Yeah.
plan. So now the thing I'm procrastinating on is putting that proposal together and see what happens. But I think it'll be good. I think it's necessary. I
Yeah.
think it
That's
could be
awesome.
helpful. And that's kind of the big project that I have in mind right now.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. We'll have to keep an eye out for that future book. Then that's awesome.
Yeah. 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 I
Eh,
told you. So now there's so much pressure
That's right.
to
Now I'm
to
gonna
do it.
I'm gonna hold you to it. I'm
Yeah.
expecting a book to come out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. And what's the
Yeah.
best way for people to keep track then of your work and wait for this book to eventually come out? So
Oh man, I screwed myself really.
yeah, you're
Uh so the best way to see all my work is to go on my website, angeleduardo.com. I'm also on Twitter a lot at strangeledweird. And that's the best way to find me.
awesome. Well, thanks so much then for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and experiences. It's really cool. So
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It was great talking to you, man.